things, and because the Northern Passage is so remote, there isn't any easy way to monitor it except with technologies that's being developed by OEA and similar companies. In Newfoundland, again, they're very, the East Coast is very much environmentally focused, so here you have a company that is dealing with communications again in terms of mobile and fixed satellites to communicate with these far off distant locations and maintaining communications across not only Canada but around the world. And they're finding uses again in search and rescue and monitoring of the coastlines, as well as a variety of other more commercial applications. But not only do we have big companies that are doing this kind of exploration and monitoring of our little planet Earth, but we also have a growing number of entrepreneurial programs that are going on in Canada. And to sort of house these thrusts, you have the Canadian Space Commerce Association, which brings together these entrepreneurial types and allows them to work together and figure out how to build small space companies in Canada. And right now, it's something new that Canadians are looking at, because again, much like you have a turn in the U.S. from very government, very military organized, and these sources of funding, it's turning now very much private in the U.S. So Canadians are following that same model and starting up this stuff. And in order to do that, they need to get the guys on Bay Street to become familiar with and understand that this is actually possible within Canada's advanced technology markets. So one of the things that, once we have all this technology, one of the things that the Canadian government needs to focus on is providing a policy, a national policy, that enables the industry to work within and further develop our abilities in human exploration of space. And as it stands now, Canada has no comprehensive space policy. Really, the government's members of government kind of look at each other and say, well, weren't you doing that? I was doing something. Who was doing this? So there's a lot of back and forth that's going on right now, because there was a lot with Phoenix having been completed now, with Dexter having been launched. There are no major space projects in the pipe now. So there's really, well, for any space, especially in space, for any program to really excel and to really stimulate development, you need to have that one focused project that sort of calls everybody together, that rallies everybody together and say, this is the direction we're going in. That's why you saw the George Bush doing what he did, and Mike Griffin turning around and saying, okay, here's how we're going to get to the moon and Mars. So a similar thing needs to happen in Canada. Right now, the CSA is working with an interim president. In order for Canada to provide any major funding of any space project, it needs to have an established president. An acting president does not provide authority to fund major projects. This became an issue about a year and a half ago, when Canada was the leading candidate for the European Space Agency's ExoMars rover. It was actually the chassis for the rover was actually being developed here at MDA Space Missions in Brampton. It would have been the first time that Canadians had provided any major roving capabilities on Mars to another country. Well, in general, Canadians have never provided that kind of capability, but to provide it to not the Canadian Space Agency but the European Space Agency is a huge thing. It got stopped by the Canadian, or didn't get stopped. The problem is that the European Space Agency had a deadline, and they needed MDA needed funding from the CSA to get the go-ahead, and because there was no president, that funding couldn't be okayed, and that $20 million that the MDA needed never happened, and subsequently the European Space Agency went with the runner-up in their selection for the ExoMars project. So to try and improve upon this situation, you have think tanks like the Rideau Institute in Ottawa actively working to engage politicians on Parliament Hill, making them aware of what Canada's capabilities are and what the industry needs in order to move forward in its technology development. And the biggest problem that the politicians are becoming aware of right now are these things called ITAR and the Canadian equivalent CGP. Just in brief, and this is a very wordy slide, I'm sorry for that, it looks familiar though, doesn't it, Mary?
You criticizing my slide?
No, I'm just saying. But what ITAR stands for is International Trade and Arms Regulation, and to summarize what is said on this slide is it basically restricts everything that Canadians can work on and what is exported from the United States that has potential space and military applications. So, for example, something like something as simple as the idea of ITAR was so that somebody doesn't go to the U.S., buy technologies like a laser-guided system to mount on their missile, and then be able to use it to target the U.S. That was the overall goal of ITAR. In practice, nowadays, the way it's interpreted is that if you are a space company in Canada and want to buy a specialized bolt for space applications, it could take you anywhere from 8 months to a year and a half to get that bolt in Canada. And you need the State Department of the U.S. to okay you as a Canadian company and as an individual to, in order for you to use that bolt. Now, and the other things that this limits as well is Canadians working on any American project. And this is why you saw back in the spring the whole MDA space missions being sold to ATK in the US. Why that was a big issue, and the whole reason MDA was doing that is because they wanted access to that American market. And as a solely Canadian-owned company, ITAR prevents them from getting full access to those kinds of contracts. However, it's not as simple as them owning the company, because you have Canadians within MDA that would still not be able to work on those projects because of their citizenship. So this is where a lot of the ITAR becomes a problem and is detrimental to the Canadian industry. To try and combat some of that, what the politicians need to do is work with the United States in providing sanctions and allowing special privileges like the U.S. has done with places like Australia and Europe. And Canada has that, or has those opportunities. It's just a matter of the Canadian politicians pursuing them. And one of the ways in which Canada has kind of tried to ease those tensions as far as ITAR restrictions are concerned is that they've come up with the Canadian equivalent being the Controlled Goods Program, which effectively operates the same way as ITAR, in that you have to have controlled areas within Canadian aerospace companies and Canadian high technology companies, controlled secure areas that you can guarantee that only people with certain privileges can get access to and read the information on. So while this was supposed to help with the ITAR thing, this only exacerbates the highly restrictive nature anyway, because now you've taken the American restrictions and whittled them down even a little bit further in Canadian terms, and so now you have this very, very restrictive environment, and it sort of dampers the technology development and research that can take place.